I need some traction.
So without further ado, our first speaker, he can fly like a bird, he can sting like a bee, he's faster than a speeding bullet. The man, the myth, the legend. Give it up for Jay Simons from Atlassian.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Hey, how's it going? Some familiar faces. So I certainly can't live up to that description. And they misspelled my name. So I'm Jay from Atlassian. Who's familiar with Atlassian? Anyone in the crowd? So awesome. So this is a little bit of a talk about kind of a unique path that we've traveled to get to where we are today, and hopefully to get to where we're trying to go. And this is a pretty unique journey. I tried to package up some tips or some guidance around things that you could consider in the businesses that you're building. Mileage, as most of you know, varies based on what we're trying to accomplish and who we are. But this is a little bit of our journey. So for those unfamiliar with Atlassian, our mission is to unleash the potential of teams. We believe that most human achievement comes not from one single lone genius or an individual, but typically the groups of people that coordinate and communicate behind maybe that individual's single idea to create something magical, whether that's a self-driving car, or whether that's all the businesses that you're creating. It comes from teamwork, and teamwork is really hard. So if you're unfamiliar with our products, they largely kind of wrap around what we think of as the three core pillars of teamwork and collaboration. Groups of people need better ways to manage work that needs to be done, tasks and to-dos and kind of planning, that sort of thing. They need better ways to create and share content, and they need better ways to communicate and message. And so largely our product family kind of wraps around those three things. We're early in our mission. We have lots of teams yet to reach, but that's what we're about. The kind of guiding principle, I think, of some of the choices we've made is to buck convention. And so I think what you'll hear is some of the decisions we've made, I think especially out of Silicon Valley, not to give the Silicon Valley echo chamber a bit of a bad rap, but in Silicon Valley kind of venture capital, the playbook would not necessarily describe the choices that we made. So we had to sort of make a bunch of unusual choices. And I love this quote from Dr. Seuss, "You have to be odd to be number one." We've always thought about kind of attacking problems from just first principles. If we could start from scratch, blank slate, and we knew nothing, what would we do? And I think if you look around kind of any industry, there's a lot of examples of companies or people or things that are bucking convention. And permit me to segue for a minute and describe one that I think I'm a little bit passionate about, which is the humble toilet. Anyone in the audience fans of Japanese toilets? Yeah. So that's a definite user right there, a passionate yes. Because I think if you haven't used one, they're a little bit daunting to use for the first time. But it's sort of, I think, when you go there, you never go back, possibly, as long as you can find one. I'm a little bit of a gadget nut. And so the Japanese toilet combines a couple of my special interests, mostly on the technology side. But if you've ever seen them, they're sort of like a wonder of different buttons and knobs and features and capabilities, most of which are kind of indecipherable. So these are a couple of shots of the control panels on different models of Japanese toilets. And true story, some of you may have heard me tell this before, but I was in Japan in my hotel room and sort of looked down at this particular model that I hadn't seen before and noticed a couple of buttons that I'd never seen that I was a little bit curious about. So some of you might see them. The first is, why would they encourage my kids to drink out of this toilet? I don't know what else you could possibly consider that button to do, but to create a drinking fountain. And then the next one, which I think was a little bit more curious, was this button. Like, seriously, what the hell does that do, right? And I was in this hotel room for 4 days before I pushed this button. So I'm probably not the target market. But the possibly totally relevant segue back to the talk is mostly about practicing patience, I think, in the businesses that we're building. That's something that I'll talk a little bit later that we've certainly subscribed to, thinking very long term about the decisions that we're making and the choices that we make in our business models and the features we add to products and the customers that we acquire and the markets that we're targeting. So I will tell you, by the way, that because usually people want to know what this button did. I'm not quite sure. I think it was sort of like a little bit of everything all at once. And I wasn't actually on the toilet when I pushed it because I was scared of what it would do. So there's five kind of things that we've done as a business and choices we've made that I try to package a little bit into maybe some advice or tips. The one decision we made, which I think was key to the business that we've been able to build and scale, was that we thought about a very, very, very big market. And that's sort of unconventional, I think, in enterprise software. A lot of enterprise software begins by targeting the most valuable segment of that market, the Fortune 500 or the Fortune 1000 or the Global 2000, the biggest companies with the biggest budgets. And when you do that, it typically informs a lot of things about your business model and a lot of things about your products. And so you would price to capitalize or maximize all of the dollars that you want to sort of get from the most valuable segment of the market. And in our case, we thought about reaching what we describe as the Fortune 500,000. There isn't such a thing. But it's a good image of this big global market of 500,000 companies that we could potentially sell to. And to do that, we had to price for volume, and we had to build a model that enabled us to reach 500,000 companies. So the very first product of ours was a product called Jira, which is an issue and project tracking system. Started its life as a bug tracker. And Jira, the first version of Jira had one flat price, $800. So if you were a commercial business and you had 20,000 employees, you paid $800. If you were a startup with 5 employees, you paid $800. That was it. It was the most you could pay for an unlimited number of users and every feature we had. We gave a 50% discount to academic institutions, and we made it free for any open source or nonprofit. That was basically the pricing model. And if we had been venture-backed at the time, I'm certain that the guidance we would have gotten would have been different. It would have said, you can't make enough money fast enough from a product that's priced at $800. You should be targeting companies with real budgets, with real problems, and then you should sell them a product at a real price point. And we didn't do that. And I think this was a really an important key to our success, because it allowed us to seed the market with Jira relatively quickly, and we removed price as a point of friction. We didn't have to explain to anybody why the product cost what it did, because it was sort of a no-brainer. $800 was easy for somebody to put on a credit card, to kind of buy without budget approval or without budget planning. So it was a relatively straightforward thing to, for companies to buy. And then actually seeding the open source market with our products was another sort of like key benefit that I think we hadn't really thought intentionally about, because it created a kind of repeater signal for people that could become potential users of our software that hadn't been exposed to it yet, but did get exposed as a participant in an open source project. They saw it, they used it when they were contributing to open source, and then they went back to their companies and said, I'd like to use that same thing inside of my company, and guess what? It's only $800. And so we made it really, really simple for people to basically to buy the product. And when we built our business model, largely the business model extended from that price point. Maybe famously, we don't have a traditional quota-carrying sales force. And one of the main reasons we didn't is because we couldn't afford one. Like, you couldn't justify a sales team selling an $800 product. They would have to sell a lot of $800 product in order to justify how much we would invest in a sales team. So we had to think about how we would automate and reach customers without a traditional sales approach. And there's sort of like the things in bold kind of bookended the way our model was built. The first is that we believed we could build products that were bought, not sold. That we would invest a lot of energy in making the product simple, easy to try, easy to discover, easy to onboard, and that if it did the things that customers were looking for it to do, they would hire it, they would buy it. And if we made pricing simple, it'd be even easier for them to buy. And then at the very bottom, we believed that the product needed to enable customers to sort of like discover the value in minutes. They didn't need to go through kind of a big demo. They didn't need to ask a bunch of questions that they maybe couldn't answer themselves. They could self-serve. And so that informed a lot of things that we did as a business that helped move the model forward and it kind of accelerate. And we think of our business model as a flywheel. And if you know what a flywheel is, it's this big, heavy instrument that is very difficult to spin. You spin it with gradual nudges, and it gets faster over time. And the benefit of a flywheel is it also doesn't slow down abruptly. It might slow down gradually, and you can continue to sort of push it to keep its momentum. And so we made choices like all of our pricing was transparent and online. And that's still true today, 15 years later. There isn't a product that says, contact us to figure out how much this costs. We want the customer to know exactly how much it costs up front, which takes some courage. All of our products are free to try, which I think is probably pretty standard and common now in the world of SaaS. Was pretty unusual and unconventional in 2002. We don't gate any content. There's no forms. And so our marketing organization has to trust that if there's something we've created that's super valuable, we're not going to require you to give us a whole bunch of personal information in order to read it. We're going to trust that more people will access it if we don't put a hurdle that they need to jump over to get it. So the whole point is removing friction. We decided early on that at $800, we couldn't afford to negotiate a custom license agreement. And so we just said no. Whenever anyone said, hey, listen, your indemnity clause doesn't work for my company, I need you to rewrite it, we would say, nope. Maybe if we charge you 80 grand, we would do that. If we're charging you $800, we can't afford to do it. And where customers said, well, I'm not going to buy your product then, we had to be okay to say, okay, you can go buy an $80,000 product where you can renegotiate the contract. So no custom agreements. And by the way, that's scaled up to 85,000 customers today. We don't have any modified EULAs. And so that's taken a long time to do with a lot of know and a lot of education of the market and the customer base. But again, it's removed friction for our business and allowed us to scale. No hidden pricing. There's part of the philosophy of the company is a little bit like what Tesla does today. We believe most buyers, what they care about is a fair price. Most people don't want to pay something more than what anyone else has paid. And part of the challenge with maybe traditional sales models is that's not true, right? Like a good salesperson is going to negotiate a higher price. And we believed that transparency meant that we would play fair with all customers. And we just wanted to make purchasing simple. Swipe a credit card, get going. So that's sort of the model. And there's kind of 3 things that we believe needed to add up in order to achieve high volume and tackle the Fortune 500,000. We needed a great product that could sell itself. We needed low pricing to remove friction. And then we needed to focus on automation and kind of moving the customer through the journey as simply and as efficiently as possible. And so the way our model works is it kind of begins with a big investment in product and continuing to refine and improve the feature set and the onboarding experience and everything that you do to sort of delight to create a great first impression. We need to keep prices low, right? Because if prices are high, the customers are going to pause and say, why are you charging me so much for this thing? Probably they got to talk to somebody about it. So we want to keep prices low so they don't. Naturally, we want companies to purchase in volume, or we want a lot of companies to buy. In order to do that, we need to sell online. So early on, as a company, we'd sold in over 100 countries. I think we have customers in over 142 countries in places where we obviously don't have people. The internet, again, is an obvious way to reach people now. In 2002, it was a little bit less obvious. In order to sell online, we have to actually have transparent, fair pricing because people would pause to ask us how much it was. And we need an easy trial. We need a very simple onboarding and trial experience. And that brings us all the way back to the beginning, which full circle, you have to create a frictionless product and continue to refine that. So that's sort of like decision number 1. Decision number 2, which again is super unconventional, is we added a second product in our second year. And again, most advisors of companies would say, you're batshit crazy. You've just created the first product. You've got some market fit. You've got customer momentum. People are buying this thing. You've got a long list of features that people want. What are you doing? Put all of your energy on that first thing. Don't distract yourselves by building a second thing. And who knows? Who knows if we had just focused on only Jira, and we hadn't created our second product, Confluence, whether or not we would have achieved the same success. I believe that we wouldn't, because we learned at a really early age how to cross-sell, how to package, how to merchandise. And we became basically a store with multiple products, which is a really important discipline. A lot of companies don't learn that skill and don't develop it until they're pretty mature and they're large. And there's a huge learning curve where we have to figure out those things. And so when you look at kind of our history of organic product development and acquisition, every year we've sort of built out more of a product portfolio all the way up until we added Trello. Excited to have Michael talk after me to the product family. And I think the key thing here is just a skill around cross-selling, upselling, packaging, and learning the discipline of when somebody walks into your store, not trying to sell them the entire outfit, but understanding that they came for a pair of socks. And you just want to sell them the pair of socks, let them know that you've got pants, belts, shirts, shoes, but gradually over time, kind of expose them to the other parts of the outfit that you want them to wear, and just get really smart and disciplined around that. So I often describe, when you look at our business, if you take the ceiling off the business, we sort of look a lot more like Amazon.com than maybe a traditional enterprise software company like Oracle, because we've had to, with automation and growth hacking and experimentation, learn how to expose a customer to product B where they just bought product A. And we try to do that in really smart ways in product, because we don't have a human vehicle to knock on the door and say, let me talk to you about the 5 other things you haven't bought. So I think a really important strength and discipline that we learned at an early age that's changed the company. If we were just Jira, I probably wouldn't be up here today, because we'd be a one-product company and a lot smaller. The fact that we've got a really big portfolio that solves a lot of different problems around a common theme of teamwork, and that we've had to build the skill of learning how to land with one particular product and expand within organizations has been a key skill, I think, for the business to learn. Third thing, which is also unconventional and hard, is a willingness to forfeit near-term revenue in order to widen the funnel and the opportunity for us, for ourselves over the long term. And one kind of critical juncture for us was in 2009, global financial crisis. Every business, I think, on the planet slowed in some shape or form, including us. And we looked really closely at different cohorts of customers that were adopting our products. And remember, our products at this stage, the pricing had changed a little bit, but we sold in user tiers. So you bought up to 50 users, or up to 100 users, or up to 250 users, or 500 users, and you sort of graduated into different user tiers. We noticed in 2009 that the first entry-level tier, 0 to 10, was suffering the most. And that's kind of intuitive, because there were a lot of small, young companies that were in that cohort, companies with only 10 employees. And the product at the time was $1,500, I think, for a 10-user license. And so we decided basically to give that cohort away, because it wasn't growing. I think it was still a couple $1 million in revenue a year. But rather than hold on to that revenue, we thought, what if we could make that 10-user tier virtually free for companies that were feeling more of a pinch in the global financial crisis? Would the benefit to us be kind of wider top of the funnel, more interest of young companies that had an opportunity to grow, and more customers that joined Atlassian in that segment that became word-of-mouth evangelists? When they went out to a bar and they met with a friend that worked at a 1,000-person company, would they advocate for us? That's super valuable. Hard to measure and quantify, but super valuable. And so we decided to do that. And the one switch was, rather than give the product away, we decided to charge a nominal fee for it, $10. And we donated that $10 to a charity, one particular charity that we picked, Room to Read. And so for every 10 user license, the customer would pay $10, so they'd opt in a little bit, and that $10 would go to charity. And since we launched that in 2009, I think we've generated over $5 million in these small 10 user donations to that single philanthropy that helps. Oh yeah, thanks. That helps. That's applause on behalf of customers because they make the donation, but it helps. Room to Read helps basically, they're tackling change through the education of children in developing countries. The benefit to us, by the way, it's not all one-sided. We benefited hugely because it absolutely did what we thought it would do, which is it order of magnitude grew that entry-level tier. So customers that weren't joining the Atlassian family because it was $1,500, a lot of them joined at 10, and then a lot of them became 11, 15, 20, 100 licensed customers and sort of grew with us over time. And the way we kind of think about our model and our business is a little bit like a hill of snow. And so there's kind of two ways that we can grow the business, really. We can steepen the curve of the hill. And so we've got snowballs that we've started that are rolling down the hill. Jira was the first one, Confluence was the second one. And they pick up snow as they roll down the hill. So one thing that we want to be able to do is if we make the hill steeper, the snowballs that are already rolling down the hill pick up more snow, they accumulate more snow. And we steepen the slope of the hill by doing what I just described, by lowering price or by creating kind of a different package that brings more customers into the business. The more customers that start with Jira at 10 users are more customers that we could potentially cross-sell to Confluence at 10 users. So that's one way that we do it. The other way that we think about accelerating the business is adding more balls to the top of the hill. And again, the steeper the hill is, the faster those balls begin their journey down the hill. And sort of the way we think about it. So now we've got a hill that we've been practicing on the steepness of the curve with every year a new ball that we sort of start at the top and begin its descent down, hopefully with more acceleration than the balls that came before it. So that's the third. The fourth brings me back to the toilet analogy, which is the connection point, but it's really about practicing patience. And I think the hard part about our business that even when I joined 10 years ago, took me a while to kind of learn was the ability to defer greed and kind of near-term gain for maybe the same result or a slightly bigger result over the long term. And here's one chart that I think if any of you are in enterprise businesses, you will probably sigh at a little bit. But this is our booking. This shows our bookings linearity, not revenue linearity, because revenue linearity in most SaaS companies looks like this because you recognize revenue evenly with a monthly or an annual subscription. This is actually billings or sales for us. And this is a really unusual chart. It shows how linear our business is. So in a given quarter of 12 or 13 weeks, most of you that work in enterprise software companies will be familiar with sort of the hockey stick at the end of the quarter, where maybe we're 40% of the way to our target or 50% of the way through our target, and there's a lot of nail biting and pressure and deal grinding in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And so you see this massive spike. And it creates a lot of uncertainty in the business because you're not sure whether or not you're going to achieve the target that you set out for the quarter or not. And it's error prone, and it's anxiety ridden and a lot of pressure. And over time, we've been able to build a business that's pretty predictable. When we began our quarter, ostensibly, there's nothing we can do to change the outcome of the quarter, right? Because it is this big flywheel that spins, and it's been spinning over 15 years, and so it's relatively predictable and stable and linear. And another example of this is maybe customer growth within a single account. And so part of the conventional thinking would say, well, you want to, when you sell to a big company, you want to take as many dollars as you possibly can, as quickly as you possibly can, which is a rational way to think about it. In our model, we thought about entering relatively simply and small, and then growing with that customer over time as the products demonstrated value. And we believe that, over the 5 or 6 or 7 year life cycle of a customer, we will achieve a greater cumulative result. We will just do it over time. And that's it's a hard thing to think about, because the conventional wisdom says, don't do that, sell as much software as you can on day one, let the customer basically take care of the rest. And this chart basically shows beginning a relationship with a particular customer in 2005, with probably a small purchase that was less than $5,000. And then over a 10-year period, having that customer basically spend incrementally more every year, up to the point where they're spending over $1 million. And by the way, without any traditional sales energy. So the cost of sale for us and this customer is extremely low. And we're basically working, accruing more value as we sell more product, as we expand, as they kind of achieve more value with the product. Final lesson is just around creating values and traditions. And I think this is probably one that maybe there'd be a lot of head nodding, but in your business, and I think Michael's got some great examples of Trello traditions in his company and in Trello. But I think early on, don't try too hard to create the things that will be the touchstones of your culture or your companies, or the things that you all care about. Yeah, 5 minutes. I got right here. But put some energy, with the culture carriers inside of your company to think about what those things are, because they're super valuable. And I'll just give you a couple of examples of ours. One thing that we do is we do a quarterly 24-hour hackathon that we call Ship It. And it used to be called FedEx Day, because the idea was that you would ship something in a day. And it became so popular externally that when you searched for FedEx, when you Googled FedEx in day, we actually outranked FedEx. And then eventually their lawyers sent us a note that was like, you cannot call this thing FedEx Day. And so we changed it to Ship It. But the idea is we all get together. You've got a day to kind of scratch whatever itch you want to scratch and work on something that you want to work on. The only requirement is that you actually stand up in front of your peers and show people what you've worked on. And the prize, by the way, is just a T-shirt. And we only give one T-shirt to a 2,000 employee company every quarter. So it is a very coveted and prized T-shirt. But the motivation is just sharing with your colleagues and with people you work with every day your creativity or your ingenuity or your stretching or your problem solving where people said that this can't be done. That's a really important one for us. We created a set of 5 values. We're an Australian company, so they feature prominently profanity, because I think Australians are taught at a very early age to swear. But the reason that they're profane is that we wanted them to be genuine and raw. Funny story is, like, one of them is don't fuck the customer. And at a really early age, in the lobby of our office in Sydney, we spelled it out: don't fuck the customer, F-U-C-K in big letters. And because we were like, we're not going to neuter that. We're not going to have it be not what it is. It'll seem genuine. Until some of us had children that were old enough to read that would come to visit us at the office. Be like, Daddy, why does it say fuck in the office? So now we changed it mostly for the kids. And then the final one, and then I'm done, is at a very early age, and this is the only real sales pitch I want to give to you. At a really early age, we effectively joined what wasn't a movement then, but kind of co-created the movement with Salesforce around the 1% movement. Idea behind the 1% movement is you pledge 1% of your profit, 1% of your equity, 1% of your employee time to a charitable cause, right, to social good. And the reason this is really important for you to consider now if you're young companies is because 1% of nothing, if you're not worth a lot right now, is a really easy thing to give, right? Think of if Twitter or Facebook or Google or the 100 or so companies in the Wall Street Journal unicorn list today, if when they were worth zilch, they had given 1% of zilch of the equity in their companies away, that is an incredible amount of money that could do something good. When Uber is worth $50 billion, 1% is a really hard thing for them to give away, right? Because it's material and it's worth something, and they've got a whole bunch of advisors and board members that are going to fight against that. It's too much money, right? You can donate a couple of million bucks, but not 1%. So this is a really powerful idea. When you're not worth a lot, it's easy to give something that's very small. And we did it at a very early age, and now that 1% is over time, it's been pretty material. It's really material now. And so, the Pledge 1% movement, I think, was just recognized by Fast Company as one of the most innovative nonprofits. There's a lot of companies that are making the pledge. If you just go to pledge1%.com, I encourage you to look at taking the pledge. I think your employees would feel good about it. You will feel good about it. I assure you that the people that you're helping with that pledge will definitely feel good about it. And I think collectively we can do a lot more good in the world if we kind of channel that energy, especially at an early age in our growth and life cycles. So that's it for me. I hope that you guys have a great event and that you enjoy Michael coming up next. And thanks for letting me babble.
I need some traction. You need some traction. Let's get some traction.